Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Pacciuto, and I'm very, very excited to have my dear friend, Mr. Randall Patrick, on with us today. Randy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing so good, man. I'm so very excited to have you on today. Can you give a quick introduction to the listeners?
Sure thing. My name is Randall Patrick. I'm a photographer based out of Savannah, Georgia. And yeah, I've been doing freelance for about a half a year. And yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I'm doing currently.
Wow, you've only been freelance for 6 months?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
it's very new. You know, all of it's very new to me, but we can definitely get into that because
Yeah.
there's some stuff to that story.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, I mean, you and I met, it was probably 3 months in real time and then 5 years in digital time.
Of course.
On Twitter, and you've quickly became one of my favorite people in the NFT space online. I am wildly drawn to your work as a film photographer. Also, the way you're able to convey emotion and mood with your photography really speaks to me. I think it's just beautiful work, and obviously, a podcast is the perfect place to talk about what your photos look like.
Hey
um,
man, I appreciate all that.
You're welcome. But
Thank you.
give me a little intro to your backstory and when you started, and sort of like what your path was to 6 months ago when you became a full time freelance photographer.
Sure. So I grew up in a super small town in Maryland. It's called Shady Side, which sounds, you know, kind of rough, but it was a nice little neighborhood growing up in, like 5,000 people. And I grew up like drawing, skateboarding, a bunch of stuff like that. And after high school, I just went into blue collar work. I didn't go to college. I didn't want to burden my family with any sort of, finances like that. And
Hmm.
uh, I didn't have the funds either. So I was like, you know what? I think I'll go down that path. And so I did that for 10 years. And then more recently, I picked up a film camera in like 2018. And that was my first experience ever doing photography other than, snapping some pictures on my phone.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. And then after that, I just picked it up and ran with it. And now I'm here today trying to do the freelance stuff. It's difficult, it's challenging, but given 10 years and working in extreme heat, extreme cold, I think it was time for me to give that up and, try and pursue this passion of mine. So
I mean, that's
it's been,
incredible. So I've been fully freelance for about 2 years from now. So the good news is it doesn't get any easier. Um, there
that's
is
great news.
Yeah, no, it's great. There's an ebb and a flow to this business that comes, I think, easier as you spend more time, make more connections, meet more people, kind of thing. I mean, anyone who spends 5 minutes looking at your portfolio is going to book you for something, right? So I think at the end of the day, like you're at the very, very beginning stage of what will be a very long career in the space for you because your work is just incredible. But like, I'm shocked that you've only been taking pictures for like 4 years now. What like prompted you to start taking pictures?
Oh yeah. I mean, thank you, by the way. Basically so to give even more of a backstory for me, I was in the church for a long time, about 13 years of my life. I ended up getting married really young, and also divorced young. So that was around 2016, 2017 when that happened. And um, after that, I had left my faith. I was just recently divorced, super young. So it was a very transformative time for me to kind of figure out what my life was going to be like
Hmm.
after that, because so much of my foundation and what I was into was kind of just, ripped from beneath me. So it was a lot of soul searching. And luckily, the friends that I had at the time, who I skated with constantly, they were also shooting on film, and they introduced me to uh, that kind of art, and I just never really messed with it before. And So when I got a camera, I got a really nice Nikon F2 for only $65 from a good friend of mine, and
Nice.
um, I couldn't stop getting into it. I just kept going out exploring, and I think during that time, I think the camera was really my version of therapy after all the things that went down, and
Mm.
um, it was kind of a way for me to figure out who I was and who I was going to be after, changing the course of my own life.
Wow, man.
So that was a huge, huge thing for me, was connecting with the camera, and it was really pointing it at myself and saying, like, who am I? Like, why do I exist? And what can I bring to the world? So I think that was a big part for me.
Wow, dude, it's crazy because, I mean, I relate to that tremendously. I mean, I went through I mean, minus the relationship aspect, but I in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, I lost my job, lost any
Mm,
sort of sense or understanding of like who or what I was. Right, like so much of my adult life had been, tied to an occupation, a job, a title, right, stuff that I didn't have anymore. And
yeah.
honestly, if it weren't for finding photography and like you said, it was therapy for me, like figuring out like what I wanted out of my life. Like, God, I don't know where the fuck I would be right now. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's such a relatable feeling for me because I felt those exact feelings. So yeah, it is a wonderful sort of coincidence, and that we sort of had that same similar experience. For me, I still deal with like nagging questions on how I measure success with this new creative career. Because it used to be super easy for me to do that with a regular 9 to 5 job, right? Like I can dictate how much money I make and I can tell you how
Exactly.
successful I'm being. How does that factor into sort of like your planning in your life now? Like how do you consider yourself a success?
Um, yeah, success is a funny word, you know. I think, well, just to kind of backtrack, like I left my last job, because I moved from Baltimore City to Savannah
Mm-hmm.
last year in September, and with that, I left a very cushy job that was, I was working at the FDA,
Oh wow.
doing HVAC work and all that, and doing office administration. Like, so I had a really, really easy job, surprisingly enough, that paid super well. I liked most of my employees. You know how that goes. Um, or coworkers, not employees. I definitely didn't own it. But switching from that to moving and quitting that job to starting all over here in Savannah, I was like, now is high time to at least go for it. And success was, I mean, neither here or there. It's, I'm still struggling today. It's, my bank account doesn't look as good as it used to,
I feel
back
that.
when I had that nice job. So it's hard to really measure that success. I mean, I've been able to keep the lights on. I've been able to at least feed myself once a day. Like, the artist life is a big struggle that I've never really experienced, to this degree. I did play music and toured the States for some time, so I experienced a little bit of that, like trying to chase the dream in that regard. But this is such a, you know, it's like a singular thing where I don't have a team of people. It's myself. I'm my own marketing. I'm my own
Oh yeah. What?
PR, everything. It's a lot to manage.
Yeah, I'm in the throes of, so I do a weekly newsletter and I'm in the throes of like a post and like an article that I'm writing called "So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur." Being a one man band, solo artistry is not easy, right? It comes with inherent work ethic and like an immense amount of obstacles to just be able to like consider yourself successful or just fucking pay rent, right? Like there's a lot, like you
Yeah,
said, that goes into the day to day that people don't see. They just see the pretty pictures on Instagram and Twitter and think, oh wow, yeah, um, but
right. I mean, it's crazy, man. It's like, I had never really gotten to hear from other people's experiences until this past year in freelancing. I was like, am I crazy for having like existential crises every week? Like,
Nope, not at all.
always in fear. Like, um, but at the end of the day, it's you got to trust that things are going to keep happening as long as you keep moving forward. So,
I believe that wholeheartedly. I think every trial and tribulation that I've faced to date is leading to the place where, I wake up and I'm financially free. I wake up, I no longer encounter imposter syndrome, right? Like I no longer have questions about like my life. And I think that, it takes time to get there, right? Like I often harp on about like, could my 25-year-old self know what my 35-year-old self learned? And the answer is always no, right? So, as you get older and as you sort of grow into any career, whether it's an artistic one or whatever you're doing, you inherently get more comfortable in it. And it's just a, matter of time.
oh, for certain. And like that's the crazy part is, I've only been shooting for 4 years, and
Yeah,
in those 4 years, like
that boggles my
I've,
mind.
I mean, I've only gained so much knowledge about photography too. So like that's also another big thing that I fear is like, I need to keep learning because I've been using film like from day one. Like I don't really shoot digital at all. And that's a hurdle that like seems a little bit crazy to have to figure out, but
Oh no.
it's a whole different beast.
No, no
I'm
hurdle, no hurdle. I mean, the work you can create with an F2 and some Portra, it's gonna make shooting digitally a cakewalk for you. You can see everything you shoot right after you shoot it.
Yeah,
It's
but
no
that's
three to
the
five
scary
business
part.
days.
Like I can accept the fact that like, oh, I missed that shot. Like, but if I'm looking at the screen over and over again, I'm scared that I'm gonna get way too
In your head.
in my head about it. Like there's so many knobs and dials and weird settings everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy to me.
Yeah, that's funny. But buy a Fuji. It's like the closest thing to a film camera I could recommend. I've shot them all, and it's pretty easy, and they're like very film sort of centric layouts that I think you'd be able to pick up pretty easily.
Yeah, I've
I
definitely seen some good things about them.
Yeah, oh for sure. I'm marveled at the fact that you've been on this journey for such a short period of time because your work speaks to that of someone who's been doing it their entire life. Talk to me about inspirations and like sort of the artistic drive to create work. Like what makes you want to be a photographer?
Yeah, I'd probably venture to say that like I grew up in this household that was this is kind of like more to the story than I thought I was going to share, but I think it's important and kind of explains why I shoot the way I shoot and why I see the world the way that I see it. But I grew up in a home that was riddled with, drug abuse. My brother got into hard drugs when I was very young, and had struggled with it honestly until, today. It's still like an ongoing thing.
Hmm.
But during that time growing up, I consumed a lot of movies because I was holing up in my room because I didn't want to, deal with everything else outside of my room and hearing the terrible things that were being said, et cetera, et cetera. I don't
Hmm.
need to get into all that, but
Sure.
um, I was consuming a lot of movies and like seeing the world through this like cinematic lens, and it was always so romantic to me. And with that being said, like I had daydreamed a lot. Like my brain always took me to places where I wasn't. And I think that like picking up a camera, it allowed me to kind of like translate those like daydream feelings like through a photo. Like I had never really thought I could capture that kind of essence and like this romanticized version of life that I didn't have as a kid. So like now that I have the ability to create something that feels reminiscent of my childhood or just like kind of encapsulates that like just that overall feeling of like nostalgia in a way. And I hate using the word nostalgia because it's such a buzzword for, photography, but it's like, it's a way for me to connect to myself,
In the past.
in my former years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's a beautiful way for me to do that. And it keeps ever growing and changing as I get older. And like, how can I tell different people's stories in that way where it's not always focused on me. It's like, oh, like I can somehow translate that into whatever I'm shooting. Maybe there's always going to be a part of myself that's in this photo, even if people don't see it.
I gotta be honest. I think daydream is a incredible descriptive term for your work because it does feel very ethereal and dreamlike. And hearing you say that ties in very strongly with the emotions that I feel when I look at your work. So it's cool to hear you say that because then it just sort of like reiterates that I'm feeling the thing that you're trying to create. Like that's cool.
Yeah, I mean that's that's a huge compliment for me. And you know, we always talk about like, what is your why? Like, and I hate that question. Like, why are you shooting? Like all that. And it took me like up until this past year, like I never really understood why I was shooting. I just knew that I was, and like I was continuing to do it because it's this like ever growing search for answers that like you feel like you don't have the capacity to understand. And
Oh.
I don't know. I feel like I'm starting to go off on a
Not at
weird
all. No, not at all.
weird
Dude, I
thing,
think
but
that's a beautifully accurate way to describe it. Like I think, you know, I've only been in this I'm going to say journey because I'm a dork, but like this artistic sort of life of mine has only been happening for it'll be 2 years in August, right? So I barely, I'm half in this game as long as you have, and then like 1/10 as long as some other people have been in. And to me, the thing that I often struggle with is trying to find an expressive way to describe my work, or like what am I trying to say? What is the voice that I'm trying to put out in the things that I create? And for someone who's been doing it like an equally short period of time, to be able to have that sort of notion in your mind that you're looking for this like dreamlike ethereal beauty and be able to like fucking deliver on it is amazing. That's amazing.
hey, Lightroom's great, man.
uh, Come on, shut up.
No.
I mean, at the end of the day, you still create images and you build the work before you go to fucking edit it. That's
No,
imposter
man.
syndrome, Randy, right there, because that's a cop out. Your work is incredible.
Hey, if I'm not talking shit about myself, I'm not really being myself.
That's
So
fair. That's fair. One of the only other things that I struggle with is not really like imposter syndrome. Like I know that this is the thing that I'm supposed to, do with my life. It's probably confidence. Like I struggle with sort of like selling myself to people. And I know you and I have had this conversation before about like getting work and like booking jobs and things like that. I think the only thing that I struggle with from time to time is like my confidence. Like you get a lot of no's before you get like the work that you want to be doing. And that's something that I kind of go back and forth a lot on because you're always being told no. And then you get a couple yeses and it feels good. Talk to me about your own journey with your confidence since going full time and freelance, and some wins that you've had lately that sort of reinforces your ability to be confident in your work.
oh yeah. Confidence is really tricky, like especially when it's tied to your artwork. And so I guess like with more recent stuff, like I shot my first like really small intimate wedding. That was all on film, which was kind of ballsy for me to do.
Oh yeah, big time.
You know, but at the end of the day, I think the more that I just force myself into uncomfortable positions and something that challenges me, like the more I give myself the opportunity to shine. Like
Ooh.
if I'm not doing that, then I'm just gonna stay complacent. And I just really haven't. I'm trying not to say no to jobs. Like even though I feel like I might not be able to do it, like if I don't try, I'll never know. Like
That's a
if
great
I can even
attitude.
pull it off. So like, I just got reached out to by some random guy on Instagram, but he's doing like ad work for White Claw, which is really funny. No laws but the claws, but um, so I'm going to be doing that, which is something that I never thought I'd be doing. And not that that's exciting work, but it's something different. It's something I haven't worked with, and
I
um,
think that's exciting. It's a major brand.
oh yeah, I mean it's weird, like I don't really do product photography, like that's like something that
But that
I might
also,
have.
I was also say that that also could give you sort of a unique eye to create something different, right? Because at the end of the day, there's only so many ways to photograph a can, right? But like the way that you,
Yeah.
but no, but seriously, the way that you approach your work and your process could be wholly different than someone who's sitting in a, a light filled studio with 50 strobes and, different backgrounds and shit. You know what I mean? The way that you come about it will be entirely different, which could make it to be a entirely unique and better way of doing something.
Yeah, I mean it's I guess like my thought process is like, this might, whatever you're doing, like you might feel like you're taking a job and it's like, you know, this is like not what I want, whatever. Like I'm trying to keep the mindset that like, you know, if I take this job, like maybe this will help me get something else that I really want, like, and just keep like letting that snowball go. And um, you're even talking about stuff that I haven't even messed with, like going into a studio with strobes. Like I barely ever shoot with a flash or work with any sort of like external lights. Like
Mm-hmm.
again, another thing, like if I had to face that, like I would try it. Don't get me wrong, but like
You'd be
I need to
amazed
start.
what you could learn in a couple hours on YouTube. Trust me. it's
Oh, I YouTube University probably everything,
Me too, man. I mean,
that was a,
I don't think I'd be anywhere close to the photographer I am today were it not for a million incredible YouTube photographers who taught me so many things.
oh my God, like Willem Vierbeck. I
Oh yeah.
watched like every video of his when I was learning, and I think that's like the thing that I've been frustrated with myself about recently is like how can I take my work to the next level? And I think that really involves like knowledge and learning and because like lately I just haven't been trying to like find out new things, like get new photo books, like learn from these like greats. And
I
I
have
think
it.
that's really pivotal for like your whole career. Like
Oh, totally. I have a financially crippling photo book addiction. I can't even begin to understate how many fucking photo books I have. I'm a photo book degenerate. It's a problem.
oh, it'll be me one day when
Yeah.
I have money,
Yeah. Ease
to
it,
like put
ease
towards
into
that,
it.
right?
My Amazon cart is full of fucking photo books. Um,
Yes.
I mean, dude, I'm surprised that you are ever doubting your abilities and or that you would ever, dude, like I put your work up there with many of the photographers I follow. I mean, there is like simplistic beauty in your work that I think is it's hard to describe. I'll give you an example. There's one photo that you took that I think is probably in one of your NFTs on Foundation, I believe, because it's a one of one. It is the vacuum, the car wash thing. The what is it?
Yeah, the
Vacuum cleaner.
vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that photograph to me is like an example of an acute eye, right? Like you were able to create something marvelous out of the most mundane possible fucking thing on earth, right? It is a car wash, car vacuum, right? Like doesn't get more mundane than that, right? It is just that is what it is. And you've created this like fucking scene and this story like that draws a person in to want to be able to like know more. Like it looks like a still, it really does remind me of a still from like a movie, right? Like if you saw that as a cut frame in an A24 film, it fits right in. I'm serious.
Hey man, thank you, dude. Like and that's the crazy part too, which is like, I have a lot of conversations, not only with myself and my speedy, rapid, crazy ADHD, ADD brain, but also like conversations with other photographers about narrative, um, which is something I never really put to my work very often.
That's
But that,
surprising. Do you mean
I
like
mean,
consciously writing about it, or do you mean like developing that in the image?
I guess developing that in the image, like,
Oh, I disagree.
well, agree to disagree, but I don't know. Like that photo specifically was like, I think that was the first photo I've ever taken where I felt emotional after taking it.
Oh,
Um, and like, and this is a really long story, but I'll give you the shortened version of it. I'm sure you've also, you know, read about this story too, but um, that was like I took that shortly after we moved here to Savannah, following a really crazy traumatic family event back at home in Baltimore City where um, because of my brother's like addiction to opioids and heroin, he got himself in a really tricky situation in the city, and he was a victim of gun violence there, which was super crazy. And I actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to tell a little bit about the
no,
story because
please do.
there's a lot of really interesting happenings throughout the whole thing
Go
that,
go for it.
um, yeah. So July 25th, um, was the day that he was, you know, shot, and we didn't even know about it. My whole family and I didn't know about it for about 4 or 5 days,
Oh wow.
because he was just basically living out in the streets in Baltimore City. Um, Lo and behold, that where it took place was about 10 minutes from my apartment at the time in Baltimore, which is crazy. So fast forward the 5 days, I get a phone call from my mom while I'm at a thrift store, and she calls me and she's like, "Hey," well, frantically, saying "hey" and saying like, "Your brother was shot. You need to go find him." And I'm like, "What in the world?" You never expect to get a phone call like that,
Yeah.
And so I am like rushing from like I was about 30 minutes out of the city. I was driving like a madman, like trying to figure out what hospital he was in and all that. And I ended up going to this one hospital, and I was the first one there of my family to actually see him, which was a lot to take on
Yeah,
alone.
traumatic. Yeah.
Yeah, super traumatic. Crazy enough, my fiance's brother's ex-girlfriend was working at that hospital, and she was there, and she was the first one to be with him,
Oh
which
wow.
is kind of like, how in the world does something like that happen? Like, and the odds of
Serendipity.
that,
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's pretty crazy. But moving on from that, like, I got to be there. I got to see him. He suffered a gunshot through like his jaw, and his abdomen, and the guy unloaded a whole clip on him too. And he was lucky to only get hit twice,
Wow.
and he survived. So we're still dealing with a lot of the repercussions of that. He's got missing teeth still. He's got to have like reconstructive surgery on his jaw. A lot of crazy things. And it was a really crazy experience for my family. But back to the photo and why it kind of broke me down in the moment was, I just put out a collection like on OpenSea, and I was like feeling all the weight of like what happened with my family. I felt guilty because we had already planned to move to Savannah, and it was a month after that event. So I was like, I can't even be there for my family now. Um, we I was also dealing with like vertigo and stuff at the time, like just a lot of crazy stuff. And then my car was piling up with trash, like just because I couldn't deal with all the shit. Like I
Hmm.
just I didn't have the motivation to. And then I got a sale on OpenSea, and I was like, oh my God, like I've never sold really any of my work before that. And through that excitement, I was out taking photos, and I went and found that vacuum cleaner, and I took that shot, and I was like looking at my car and the crazy disarray it was in. And I was like, I don't even have fucking quarters on me right now to try and clean out this car, even though I'm here in this moment. And I was like, wow, like sometimes life just feels like too messy, like to clean up. And like I just didn't have what I needed to like take care of that in the moment. It was just really heavy for me. And
I mean, but
um,
there's also like in a lot of ways, a lot of poetic beauty in that, right? Like there's
oh,
like,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, it was like a weird duality with like, maybe I can like move forward with this photography thing, but then like the kind of backhand slap to like, oh, I got to deal with the things in my life like that I haven't been. And so it was like the moment of like extreme high to being met with like, oh, like don't forget that you still have things you got to deal with.
yeah. Well, that's the fun thing about trauma, that like while they will remain around for a long while, there are fleeting moments where you do get that separation from the shit that weighs on you on a on a daily, weekly basis, right?
Oh yeah,
I think one of the probably the most relatable thing that you said in that story is how heavy baggage and emotional and family stuff can weigh on you. And I think the greatest lesson that I've learned in like as I've gotten older is like I will never have all of the answers, right? And like you just kind of have to sort of do the best that you can on a moment by moment daily basis,
yeah,
because we're
that's
all
great.
just human, right? Like at the end of the day, like you had planned to move, right? Like the tragic shit that happens with your brother is out of your control in your hands, and like yeah, it seems like it's easy to seem and feel like you're leaving that situation behind and bailing on your family, but it's like, to some degree you have to like take the reins of your own life and have you be the most important aspect of it and like help out as you can, right? It's like there's I often say there's like no right answer, right? You just have to sort of do what you think feels right in the moment and hope that whatever the wreckage in the future may be is tolerable, right? Like we're only
Yeah,
human.
right. And like, I had to learn a lot of hard lessons to let go of a lot of the shit that I thought I had control over, um, or like gave myself the expectation that I had control over. Um, and yeah, I mean, like t today, like now it's like, he's working again. Like, things are starting to like come back to like a sense of normalcy,
Hmm.
um, after all that. And like, it's actually pretty funny because there was a moment me and my fiance were watching Queer Eye and
Best show.
great show,
Great
great
show.
fucking show. And there was like this one episode where it was like a family talking about their experience with like a tragic event with their family and like talking about the ambulance, and I like fucking broke down. I was like, wow, like other people feel this too.
Hmm.
And I had just been keeping that shit to myself because I was like, no one's gonna understand other than me, like, and my family, like, and I just felt like super isolated. So that was like a nice thing to kind of experience, to be like, okay, like, they got through this, like I can get through this too. And
I think
now I'm here.
we're getting a lot better as a society as of like normalizing mental health stuff, but like the greatest realization I ever had in my life is just like how common everyone's problems are. Like we all go through more or less the same shit. We all know someone who struggles with addiction. We all know someone who's died of cancer, right? We all have these sort of common threads throughout our life. Now we choose to focus on the things that make us different. And if we were able to, as people, to focus on the things that we have in common, I think life would be a lot easier.
Oh my God, yeah.
But it's true, man. Like I've been going to therapy for almost 2 years now, and it's transformed my life in ways I can never possibly articulate on a podcast or like even in writing. Like just being able to like talk about the things that I'm feeling and then be told like, guess what, dude, these are things that everyone feels. It's like, yeah, a lot of times we as people feel like there is a barrier to having these conversations with our friends and family, you know, whether we don't want to feel like we're trauma dumping or whether we don't feel like it's our place to like bring up difficult conversations. If we were able to sort of break down that barrier and say like, hey, Randy, like, dude, I'm having a rough day today, man. Can we like go grab a coffee? You know, can we talk? Like that would make things a lot easier. But, you know, again, people are shy when it comes to articulating the things that they're feeling because they feel like it's just them, right? No one else could possibly feel that way.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, you don't want to feel like a burden. And that was really the biggest sense of feeling that I had was like, I know I've gone through this, but I don't want to burden anybody else with that kind of thing, you know? And
it's like a total justifiable expression of feelings, even though it's wrong, right? Like at the end of the day, you're not a burden, right? Like there are people in your life that care about you deeply that want to be able to be there for you and be like, yo, I can help you through this because I've been through this, or like I know someone who's been through this, and let me put you in touch with them. It's like I think that's what's one of the best parts about getting older is like being able to be comfortable with my own feelings, to be able to tell people how I am actually doing on a day-to-day basis. Because so much of my 20s was like, oh, cool, let me post about the club that I'm in or the, you know, the fucking bottle service that I'm getting, right? Like none of that shit matters. Like it was like just a cover up. It was a fake social media persona that I was playing myself on TV, right? It wasn't real.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's hard to be genuine like sometimes in
Yeah.
that way. Like
You know,
um
I am surprised a bit to hear that, like, I mean, like, I'm not surprised that you've had like trauma, like everyone has, right? You've had a rough year, especially with the stuff with your brother, but I don't necessarily think that like that weight comes out in your work, right? I think there is I mean, you know, I'd probably have to do a much deeper dive, but like when I went through the breadth of your work in anticipation for this conversation, it all felt very light and airy and ethereal. Like I said, there was that dreamlike state to it that was like positive. And I wonder if that's maybe you working against what's like you feel in those moments,
hmm,
perhaps.
yeah, that's interesting. It's hard to say because like it could be. Like I've never really thought about it in that way. Like because I think there are some artists and photographers that will put out work that very much shows like how
Gray,
they're
dark,
feeling, like
yeah,
right,
moody,
right.
yeah.
And like I don't know, like a part of me feels like if I were to go in to creating with that intention that I wanted to portray that, maybe it would be less authentic from myself with
Mm,
the way that I create.
yeah,
Um,
that's a good
and
point.
I kind of just let things go as I'm feeling or like just as I'm doing. Like I don't really have to think about it, but there also like there are some like images that I've created that have like a sense of uneasy,
Hmm.
but never like anything
Darkness,
that
yeah.
really feels dark.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
I don't
probably just
know.
because you're like a good dude and you got a good heart and you like are bringing out these wonderfully light, beautiful film photos because that's like the person that you are.
Oh, thanks, John.
No problem. I mean,
Man,
dude, like,
I love the love, yo.
yeah,
I
no,
just
it's easy, bro. I like, you know, for me, and I'm unabashed about this. Like from these conversations and like from the friendships that I've made in this space, I get an immense amount of inspiration. Like you know, I look at your work, I look at someone like Trevor's work, and I look at like Film God and Tyler and Miles, and everyone does something different, right? And like the
mhm,
artistic eyes that all of these people that I've been able to become friends with inspire me greatly greatly. So it's like I get to steal from that because I get to like learn, right? At the end of the day, I'm my experience and my creativity comes from my place, but when you're able to sort of share that with other people, you learn other ways to like look at the world. Like yesterday, I was on a photo walk, I found myself looking at how the sun was like bouncing off these like houses which were like weird colors for like where I live, and like that's probably due to like some photos that I saw of yours or Tyler's or whoever's. And I think that's what's also kind of great about it. Who are like what inspires you?
Who? That's a tough one. I mean,
Or what?
like, or what? I mean, I guess we'll start with who. Like, um, so I don't have a vast knowledge of like the greats, and I've been learning a lot about, you know, a lot of photographers that have paved the way. Um, People like Gordon Parks like really inspire me for portraiture, and like really finding that human connection. He's been really integral in like seeing his story, the way that he works with people, the places he puts himself in. That's been really great for me to learn. But also like other like older greats, like Greg Girard is one. I've always loved his work, always super cinematic. But in all honesty, like the people that have inspired me the most are the people that I know, the people that like are photographers that are just my friends. Like
Yeah.
like just like what you said, they inspire me. Like to see like for example, Trevor is one of my good friends, and like the dude has a camera on him 24/7.
Hmm.
You know, like he lives and breathes like photography, and you can see it. Like, you know, and I would hope that like I can have that kind of like tenacity. You know,
Yeah.
I want to have that.
That's hard.
It is hard. It absolutely is. Like at some point, like your camera is like just an extension of your finger, like or your
Mm.
hand. And I cannot wait for the day that it feels like that. Sometimes some days it does, and some days it doesn't.
Yeah, some days it's an anvil around my neck, slowly
Right, yeah.
slowly strangling me.
Yes, like I can't tell you how many hours I spend driving in the car, like looking at something and being like, should I? Like, and then I say no. And I'm like, why the fuck am I like so like back and forth right now? And it's because I've disconnected somehow with my camera. And it's a weird feeling to be in, but um yeah. And then I guess to the second point of that question is what inspires me. And to be honest and frank with you, like I think there is just this beauty in like just living every day and surviving and like taking little moments to see things that maybe I wouldn't have looked at like otherwise and saying, "Oh, that's a moment that feels familiar."
Mm.
And I think maybe familiarity is something that like is really important to me like in my work. But to put into words what inspires me is really difficult.
Yeah, no,
I've
I
always
understand.
struggled with with that question.
You know what I think?
Because
You know, I think the greatest joy that I've received out of photography is that like you start noticing like the very, very fleeting small beauties in life, right? And like it could be
yeah,
very something stupid. Like I've taken pictures of parking cones before because I thought something about it meant something to me. Like I saw something in that moment.
yeah,
So I totally get with what you're saying because it is the mundane and the normal that sometimes is the most beautiful.
right. And I think that's what it was. I think in essence for me was like, and I guess you know because I told you about my experience with the church, and I had left the church some time ago, and I guess finding identity is another big thing for me. Is like how can I find myself even more through
Ooh,
every photo that I take?
Wow. That's heavy.
Right. I mean, like,
That
and
may
I think that that'll always be a part of me. I lost most of the friends that I had. Like, I lost literally the foundational, like, fundamental uh, thought process that I had as a
Mhm.
Christian. I was living under this guise of like, I exist here only to, get into heaven. Like, I gotta follow these rules. I gotta be a part of this thing. Like,
Yeah.
and when you don't have that anymore, and like you're like, wow, it's just me.
Mhm.
Like, and that's how I believe. Not to, talk shit about anybody else and what they believe, but
Yeah, teach their
like,
own.
right, exactly. And for me, like, I felt like there's something within me that I don't understand yet, and I'm gonna keep using this camera to try and figure that out.
Dude, I fucking love that.
Oh, thanks, man. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying right now. I'm just saying.
No,
It's
dude,
like,
dude, I relate to that greatly because I use a myriad of things to try to figure myself out, right? Photography, writing, this podcast. There's a million things that I do in life to gain further depth and knowledge of who I am as a person. And I think one of the reasons why, like, no, not to toot my own horn, but like I'm becoming a greater person every day because I'm constantly like becoming curious about the things that make me happy. Like what about my life can I develop and grow with to make myself happy? And like at the end of the day, there is no greater question that I can answer for myself than am I happy? And if it's a no, I've got to make alterations. But it's been yes so often lately that I just feel lucky. Like I am learning more, I'm growing, I'm becoming the best version of myself. And that's fucking amazing.
yeah, I mean, what more could you ask for?
Couple million,
Um,
but like, you know,
yeah, a couple $1,000,000 just to make sure I
yeah,
can,
you know,
not worry about that part of the happiness. But like, I think,
it's one of the greatest things I struggle with because were it not for financial worry, right? And I think every creative to some degree, unless you're like got a million followers on some platform, worry about that. And if it were not for any sort of financial question of my future, because that's the only thing I need to straighten out with everything in my career is like I'm perfectly content. I've made a lot of money in my life and I've been blessed to get to the point where I can literally chase dreams and start to make them a reality. But I still butt up against the fact that I don't know how to measure my creative success outside of monetary means.
yeah, yeah. And like, I had a thought that might be poignant, like, at least for me. Um, and it kind of goes with the success talk in a way. Um, but I guess in all honesty, because we were talking about like, photography, whatever, blah blah blah, makes you happy. Like, and it makes me happy to do that. And like, being on Twitter all the time, like, I feel like there is this ever growing conversation about like, what is your answer to things? Like, how do you respond to these things? Like, and I feel like if I can be honest, at the end of the day, if I'm on my deathbed and I have more questions than answers, I feel like that's like a life well lived,
Ooh,
because you're constantly on the search for something. Like, and I
fuck.
never want to give that out, like give that away or like give that up. Like, I always want to be in a point where if I have all the answers, what the fuck is it worth? Like,
Yeah,
you
well,
know?
yeah, I mean, number one, I think that's beautiful. And number two, I couldn't possibly agree with you more because if I mean, I don't think there's any person out there that has all the answers, but I think that is a great, great method for living a life well lived.
Well, I hope so. That's
Yeah.
the way I'm living right now.
Fuck. No, man, dude,
Um,
I think that's a very, very, very powerful context to view one's life because at the end of the day, if you stop asking questions, if you start trying to learn, if you stop trying to better yourself, there's no point. Like, what is the point of living? The point of living is to grow and become better and like want more and like become the best version of yourself. I agree with that a lot, man. I think that's beautiful.
Oh, thanks, John. Like, damn,
Yeah. Damn is right.
I'm thinking of things today.
Yeah, dropping knowledge, dropping that Twitter alpha, right?
Good God.
So I like to spend the last bit of every podcast doing a little bit of a rapid Q&A. Some are easy, some are a little bit harder.
Let's do it.
My first question is, what is your favorite book?
Ooh, the Bible.
Really?
I'm kidding,
Oh
though.
my gosh. I was like, you just
No,
talked about how you left the church.
no, that's just a joke. Honestly, like, I don't spend a lot of time reading, if I can be honest.
This is a safe place. You can be
Yeah, I
honest.
mean, I read a book recently. It was a book written by David Lynch.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Catching the Big Fish,
Hmm.
which is just all about like, catching creative ideas, like meditating and kind of letting things come to you rather than letting creativity be forced. Which was a good read.
I would
So I'd suggest that to anybody that's interested.
I would love to get drunk with David Lynch. I think that would be
Oh
an
my God.
entirely enjoiable experience.
Yes, it would. Oh my God. I'd love to pick his brain. He's got
A fucked up
some
brain.
crazy deep.
In a great
He's
way. In a
got
great
so
way.
many deep thoughts, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't even understand what he's responding to me with, to be
I know.
honest.
What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie. It's funny because I talked about how much I watched movies as a kid.
It's tough to name like one or two or three. It's like hard when when you're put on the spot and have to think about it. It's a tough question because I watch everything.
Yeah, and I will say I'm a very big horror film like person. Like
Hmm.
I have a slew of old VHSs that I revisit. Man, I would probably say just because it's the easiest one to pick from my brain. All right, I'm gonna give you three. How about that?
Go for it.
All right, so one is like one that really spoke to me when I was a kid, even though it kind of went over my head. But Forrest Gump,
Oh, beautiful film.
not gonna lie, beautiful film. Very like it's just so simple, like, and the themes like are so beautiful to me.
Hmm.
Even though people look at that as like, oh, it's on TBS every fucking day, like no one's gonna watch that. But um, another one is Jacob's Ladder.
Oof, good movie.
Um, And honestly, I can't even think of the third one. We'll move on from
All right,
that.
fair enough. What's your
Yeah.
favorite food?
Sushi. It's got to be sushi.
Oh, okay, you're brave. I'm just kidding. I had a bad experience with sushi about 7 years ago, and I haven't had it since.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, if you ever come to Baltimore City and I'm there, I'm taking you out because we
All right,
gotta hit my favorite spot.
all right, fine.
Yama Sushi, shout out.
I mean, dude, I've been to some like fucking top sushi places in New York City. Like, I know good sushi, like I've had it, but after that experience, I'm just like, I have like a phobia now of like, what the fuck happens if I get sick again? Like, it was legit the worst experience of my entire life. I was sick for like 6 days. I lost 16 pounds. I almost had to go to the
Are
hospital.
you serious,
Dude,
dude?
it
That's
was so bad.
insane.
I legit,
Oh my
the only reason
God.
why my parents were begging me to go to the hospital, I was like, it's fine. It was fine. It was like 3 days, and then the fourth day, I finally started eating like pastina, some like whatever noodles and like just butter and
Just
butter pasta, right?
yeah, exactly. Just starch,
But like
like just to get
legit,
something in your
yeah,
stomach.
dude, I was just drinking Pedialyte for like 2 full days, and the third day, it was crazy. Fucking 2-for-1 lunch special. I should have known better, but yeah, stupid. You live,
Oh yeah, you fucked up there.
you,
Jeez, man. That's like getting grocery store
yeah,
sushi.
you live, you
Not
learn.
worth it.
See, you live, you learn. Not something I would do in my 30s.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you believe in an afterlife?
I do and I don't sometimes,
Interesting.
depending. Because I do spend a fair amount of time like pondering that thought because like I think there's beauty in there being nothing and I think there's beauty in there being something.
Oh,
Like
I like
it
that.
it could be whatever, and I'm kind of cool with whichever way it goes. But I do think that there's a soul, there's a spirit, like,
Yeah.
and you can feel when your spirit is being like really attacked. Like you can feel when you're like completely drained of like
Mm-hmm.
any sort of life.
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't even involve your like it doesn't even involve your physical self. So there's got to be something there possibly, but like, ever since leaving the church and not thinking there's like a hell to be thrown into or a heaven to be greeted with if you've done the right things, like um I don't know. I think it's just be good,
Yeah.
like be a
Good.
nice person.
I'm
It's
with
not
you.
fucking hard.
I'm with you, man. So like I grew up in a Catholic church, and very similarly, like my father is incredibly religious, my mom's incredibly religious. I've had a priest on my podcast. I just don't identify with that with religion much anymore because like I see it for what it is. It's created by man, right? Like men created religion. Like at the end of
Yeah.
the day, what the fuck do we know? But we're supposed to tell you who you can marry and like what you can do. Like no, fuck off. I believe in an afterlife just purely based on the like ridiculous concept that we were born in the first place, like just the sheer improbable fact that we were birthed, right? One sperm out
Yeah.
of tens of billions and whatever it is. It's just like there's no way there's nothing else. I believe in spirit and soul, and like I'm a very spiritual person and I pray, but I just don't necessarily know who I pray to, if that's
I kind
fair.
of like that. I
Yeah.
think that's really nice. Like I never really thought about like, your conception, being
Yeah.
something that's like a complete anomaly. Like,
It's an accident. It's like
right.
it's impossible to quantify. Like I legit read like the sheer probability of being born is like 700 billion to 1. Like just to be born.
Wow. That's that's insane. And
It's
I'm
insane.
like I'm a double accident since my parents had a trip in Deep Creek Lake and that's how I was conceived after 6 years of nothing. So like
See? So it's
yeah.
like, and when I think about something like that, like the sheer improbability of being born, it's very hard for me to take things for granted in life, right? Like just the happy-go-lucky existence that I've had is a blessing because just the fact that I'm here is a miracle.
That's a great way to keep yourself grounded and
Yeah.
like keep yourself grateful. I love that, man.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
beautiful.
What are you most proud of?
Hmm. I think uh hmm. My first thought, like, okay. I'm proud of a lot of things in my life, but I know I keep going back to this religion conversation because I think it was my experience in the church was very detrimental to my confidence
Hmm.
um in
Another
existing
reason why I don't like it. Go on.
right and in my existence as a human being here. um I'm proud of myself for getting out of that rigmarole, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
that cycle of like constantly feeling guilty, constantly feeling like I'm not good enough. Like I think it takes a lot of courage to leave something that you've been so like held on to for so many years.
Hmm.
And I'm really proud of myself for going with my intuition and how I felt. Because a lot of people are scared to do that because it cost me almost everything in my life at the time. And I'm proud I did it because I'm in a much better place now than I ever have been, mentally, spiritually, and everything else. So I'm really proud of myself for that.
I love that, man. I think anything worth having in life is difficult inherently, and categorically gigantic life decisions like that are worth having, but they're always, always, always going to be difficult for sure.
Yeah, they're
Um,
always met with a price, that's for sure.
for sure. What's the best piece of advice someone's ever given you?
Hmm. Best piece of advice. I don't know. Like, chill out. It's gonna be okay. Like,
Yeah, I like that.
for real, like I get so like in my head about things that like I when people tell me like it's gonna be okay, like I think that's like a very cliche bit of advice, but it really does help me like take a deep breath and kind of realign myself. So,
Yeah, I think you know, call it what you want, but manifesting my future is something I've been doing for almost 2 years now, and my expectations are nowhere near as good as what reality has been. And at times, it's very easy for me to be hard on myself, like, oh, why have I not done X, Y, Z? And it's like, dude, you've been doing this for 5 minutes. Chill out.
right, yeah.
I'm with you on that. My additional tack onto that, and my best piece of advice I've ever been given is don't worry about the wreckage of the future. Like at the end of the day, the future is what it's going to be. It's there. It's out in front of you. But like if you spend fucking time worrying about what may or may not happen, you'll never be able to be anywhere near as happy as you possibly could.
Oh my God, yes. Like if you're worrying about the future, actually, I wrote something down once that kind of goes hand in hand with that. But like it was, I want to say it was like you leave no footprint if you always fear the next step.
Ooh,
So,
damn. Put that on a
well,
motivational poster. Fuck, man.
live, laugh, love next to it, man.
No, for real, that's
Oh,
fucking good.
oh, thanks, man. I do a lot of thinking, but I don't do a lot of sharing.
No, I like it. Um, Last question. Give me a recommendation for something that you've recently consumed. TV show, movie, book, podcast, literally anything. Something that you have recently saw, watched, heard that you want everyone to check out.
Okay. Recent consuming habits. Definitely shouldn't be anything McDonald's related. Um, um, man, I feel like I haven't watched anything that great recently either, which is also sad. Honestly, I don't even know if I have a recommendation right now. Isn't that sad?
Nah, it's not sad. It's hard when I put someone on the spot and ask them that question. I'll give you two of mine. They are reoccurring recommendations because I think they are transformative for people. One of them is a new movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you haven't seen it, I don't know what you're doing. I mean, not you specifically. I mean, you, the listener. Go
You're talking
fucking
to me.
go get it. Go watch it. Go buy it. Go rent it. It is just a wildly beautiful film. I've watched it like 5 times in the 2 weeks that I've owned this movie. And I didn't even rent it before buying it. I just straight bought it on Apple. That's how much confidence I had in it. And I was greatly rewarded for it. And my second recommendation is a book that I recently finished called Man's Search for Meaning. It is one of the most difficult reads I think I've ever had in my life. It tells the tale of a gentleman who spent time in concentration camp during World War II.
Wow.
And it's just an wildly powerful and importantly formative story that I think really anyone can take something from.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard so many good things about that movie. I can't even try and say what the movie is called because I know it's like everything, everywhere, blah blah blah, something.
All at once.
Yeah, definitely gonna check that out. And like, please send me that book too.
Yeah.
I guess now that you got my brain jogged real quick, on HBO Max, watch A Choice of Weapons.
Oh.
It's the Gordon Parks
Oh,
documentary.
sweet.
So it goes into like his whole career, and he was like the first African American photographer for Time magazine.
No way.
So he did a lot of incredible things, like working with like a gang leader in Harlem and being one on one with him, and his stuff for Muhammad Ali. Like there are so many incredible stories within that documentary that are just like if you're a photographer or just a human like being, honestly, watch it because it really points out a lot of great things that you might not have thought about. So
Nice.
I think it's a
I'll,
good recommendation
I'll
for
definitely
everybody.
check that out. I love a good documentary. It's like my jam. For sure. Randy, dude, thank you so very much for coming on my podcast. I have a very cheesy line. If you've been on my podcast, you're part of my family, and I'm incredibly appreciative that you took this hour out to chat with me today. You inspire me as a photographer. I think you're an incredible human being, and I want nothing but the best for you in your future, and I love you, and I think you're just a great dude, and thank you so much.
Hey man, I love you too, dude. I really appreciate the opportunity. I had a great time today. We got into a lot of good things. And I'm really just grateful for the platform to say some things how I feel. And you're a great host, man. I really appreciate what you're doing here. And everybody out there listening, keep listening.
Thanks, man.
Record.
I really appreciate it. Take care.
Hey man.